we can meditate. Greetings to you wherever you may be in the world today. We'll come back in a second. Thank you for tuning in a little bit late. Got very engaged in one of my first social outings in nearly a year and a half. Thank you for tuning in. We had a lively little 15, 20 minutes. I don't know what time it is right now, but it's 1:22, and people probably thought that we tuned out, but here we are. We're going to hang until 3. Let me let you catch up with the group space here. I had mentioned earlier in session 1 today, on day 1, the desire to speak more about meditation. And we will follow through with that promise, both with my sharing of what I do, as well as a little bit of sitting time to acquaint ourselves with something so powerful and valuable. But equally to that, I'd like to share with you that we opened it up to a bit of a dialogue here in the room, here in Kula on Maui. And there are specific topics that I personally find quite compelling that individuals here brought up. Let me bring them forward, and I will, at different times throughout this afternoon session, address them as, I think, very valuable, powerful concerns. One is, a gentleman brought up the issue of reincarnation and phenomenology of consciousness in form in different dimensions. Another gentleman brought up the issue of UFOs, and again bringing up the issue which we discussed in brief, the phenomenology of deities, both luminous and nefarious, poltergeists, ghosts, angels, devas, Brahmins, disembodied beings of consciousness. Those of you who have studied Buddhism and Eastern philosophy know that it's inseparable to talk about human life from the dimensionality of life in different planes of existence. And it's a favorite topic of mine. I don't often speak about it, but we're going to talk about it a little bit this afternoon. And if it's interesting to people here and throughout the rest of the weekend, we'll further dive into it. A woman here brought up the issue of her work with First Nations and indigenous cultures and the understanding of addiction, both on a human level, on a cultural, societal level, perhaps even on a global or a collective level. Another, again, I won't say deep insight into it, but these are areas that really fascinate me, and I find them remarkably important to keep bringing the best of me too. So if you're interested in these topics, we're going to get into them in this particular session. Meditation was also brought up by me and others here in the room, but also in context, if you will, to our Dhamma practice. I'm a little bit allergic to the word practice. I'm more inclined towards, this is a personal aesthetic, that something takes the fidelity of my intimacy and my presence and my involvements, my engagement, my artistry out of deliberate practice. And the devil's in the details. I'm down with that. Wake up every day of your life if you're an artist and go right to it. Go right forward. Do not hesitate to enhance the expression, the capacity of your artistry. We have to learn, if you're a musician, musicality, choruses, punches, refrains, beginnings and endings, and the interrelationship of the lyrics of our musicality. You got to do it over and over again, but it's never the same, is it? So practice is a very intimate expression of passion. So I use the word practice and passion to be very important. And Dhamma, enough so that you eat every day, that you shower, bathe, and answer the call of nature when you're called to do it. You show up for the intimacies of the respected tribe and family of your life. The Dhamma is the priority that enhances all things good, true, and beautiful. It makes how we eat, what we eat, a transformational event rather than just simply sustaining the biological mechanism of an organism on the planet so that we live and die. If the Dhamma isn't active, the Dhamma isn't active. Engaging Dhamma is the vocation of the meditator, the yogi, the trans-religious Buddhist. And I think that's very, very important for us. What is the purpose of my life? Why am I incarnated as a human? Why am I in the privilege of my life as I know it? Why do I have the struggles that I have? Who could ever answer ultimately the esotericism of infinity? But here we are, embodied, embedded, bleeding, oozing, living within a finite world on the precipice of the sixth, sorry to say it, mass extinction, not just of humans, but of the millions of other species, at least 200 going extinct every day, every second of every minute. And, why? 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 Who am I in this context? And what can I do is the question I ask myself. What can I do to make the best of the circumstance, not ponder the impossible? I'm a poet and a pragmatist at the same time. Are you? Art is a diligent vocation of improving our skills. To become who we are takes diligence. But we want to pursue things that nurture, expand, touch call it the essence of your reason to be alive. That raison d'etre is so, so, so important to hear it in your heart. What is it that's motivating you to be alive today, and will you make good on that promise? That to me is the real purpose of my life, and it's rooted in the word for me, Dhamma. So, reincarnation, deities, UFOs, the phenomenology of dimensionality. I mentioned early on in that discussion that was not recorded that my experience within that is primarily within the field of the psychedelic, which I've done a lot of experimentation within the intersubjective relational field of trans-physical perception, which I find utterly fascinating. For example, we're in a room filled with Tibetan, Christian, and Hindu iconography. The Dalai Lama, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, the 14th incarnation of the DH. That means a group of boys and girls looked at him at some point in his early life and said, hey, you're the 14th of the 13th, of the 12th, of the 11th. Is that a direct support for reincarnation? If His Holiness is 14, Susan Grover, the 30th, Joseph Biden, maybe just his first birth, Alan Clements, sixth birth. If that's really true, whoa. Talk about existential pre-substratum psychotherapy. Talk about post-life expansion existence. So rebirthing as how can we experience rebirthing in our lives rather than ponder it as an idea after death. And for those of you who've written to me, today, to talk about my own experience with the psychedelic, and I don't advocate the use of them. It's just not part of where I'm at in my life. I don't even advocate intensive meditation for people. It's like advocating go have sex with someone. That's not what I do. It's so sublime, so intimate, the affair with the holder of space, with the substance itself, the set and setting. It's not to be done casually. The same thing with meditation. People think that you can sit and you're doing it on your own, but meditation should not be done. And we were talking about the last dimension here, and I'll carry on, the word Kalyanamitta. Many of you know this word who've been involved in Buddhist circles. But the meaning of it, as I understand it, is a being in this dimension, a human being, who she or he has dedicated much of their lives to Dhamma or Dharma, or the transformation of mindful intelligence as vocation of consciousness and presence. They're psychonauts, they're consciousness explorers of the configuration of interiority with exteriority. They study confluence, interior consciousness and sensations at the six sense doors. The Kalyanamitta is an individual who's a savant, who's skilled in the intimate cognitive technology. Don't use the word too frequently, Alan, but get away with it right now. The cognitive technology of heightening freedom and challenging the convulsions of greed, anger, and delusion. That's the savant, the Dhamma savant, the Kalyanamitta. Characteristics of a Kalyanamitta, to me, beautiful regard for timing. They're rooted. Let's hear this one. Let's see if we can go into the meditation of what's called satya. Hang with me there. What does the word satya mean? Truthfulness. Okay. Dignity is a word, it's sort of amorphous. We know the word honesty, transparency, truthfulness, relative truthfulness. I'm not saying ultimate big T, but my being is dedicated to the meditative, transformational, awakening, inhabiting of satya. When I sit in meditation, cross-legged walking, but even sitting, in-breath, out-breath, I'm trying to employ the best as I can truthfulness of presence to my own intimacy of my own inner being. Do I have the ethical, spiritual, existential courage, and I use the word existential here, do I have the courage to face myself? That's all. Yes, you could be mindful of your thought, your feeling, your sensation, the heat, the breath, the ripple. That's beautiful. You can even have insight. But the vocation of inhabiting truthfulness gives us I think, the stamina. And I would say that resilience is rooted in truthfulness and timing and just in our own speech. Who among us can occupy the emotion of truthfulness in ourselves? I mean, we can use the words endlessly. I love you, sweetheart, and I am dedicated to honesty with you at all times except when I don't want to be. And you'll never know that because I'm in denial of that. But I'm truthful. And all of a sudden, how could you have committed to that, hubby, when in fact you've been lying to me all along, you little mother? It's a fold in my psyche. Please forgive me. That's life, right? Messy. So our meditations, how well do we occupy, I would use the word sparingly here, radical self-honesty. Take it off of other man. Go back to your own psyche. Don't work yourself out on me. Don't work your story out on me. Self-honesty is upholding that respect. Yes, there's obligations and there's overlap, there's convulsions and there's projections but no. Have a high regard. So when I sit in meditation, a radical high regard for the sanctity of the act, even if it's just 1 minute. That is so much more important than how long you sit and how frequently you sit, from my point of view. Sit in dedication to truthfulness and dignity and satya. So those are some of the dimensions we're going to get down with today. Now, let me dive into the first gentleman's question about rebirth. And I was mentioning to him, and I want to say it again to go on record, that there are a couple of books that I would really recommend if anyone wants to really study the world of rebirth. 2 books, both by the same title, called 20 Cases for Rebirth, written by a psychiatrist, Dr. Ian Stevenson, who is the head of the research lab of paranormal psychological hyperdimensionality at the University of Virginia. They're brilliant books of social scientists who went around the world to study the minds and the lives of those men and women who had unusual powers, who could fluently speak languages without learning them, who knew the details of people's lives without having met them, could recount their own previous lifetimes and even see into the future of future lifetimes, could trace and tell scientists where to go to find things that were not previously known by the culture or the society. For example, one young man who's in one of the books spoke fluent ancient Pali language. I met him at a young time when I was a monk in Burma. And Dr. Ian Stevenson and his team of people, in their test of his skills, asked where some of the things that were not known culturally could be found. And he pointed out that the last enlightened being in Sri Lanka could be found in such and such a location on the island. And if you dig deep enough, you'll see a temple there and you'll find a man's name by this. And this is where the last man died, who was said to have been enlightened in Sri Lanka. They dug and they found him. That's a very unusual case, not of rebirth alone, but of, wow, what we know of as human consciousness isn't what we really can do. So it opens up, oh wow, I don't want to just study the phenomenology of rebirth and paranormal, psychological deities. I would like to embody the possibility of actualizing those dimensions. And those of you who meditate know a lot of boys and girls get waylaid in their own meditation practice by the unthinkable radiance of psychic phenomena. I've seen people walk around monasteries for days and to the good teachings of Kalyanamitas reel them in, but all they can say is Venerable Sir or Venerable Tilashin, the nun, I am, the work is done. The work is done. I'm enlightened. I've transcended ego. And they go, yes, it's a very understandable experience. They're very polite in their Kalyanamitasship. They don't tell you you're full of shit. They just basically say yes and carry on. Notice the phenomena. Don't identify with it. Remember the key phrase that I've found over my years that defines intelligent, transparent, intersubjective awareness, i.e. mindful intelligence, is courageous self-honesty dedicated to liberating freedom. The Buddha was said to have aspired to be a Buddha to develop the state beyond states of nibbana, the ultimate extinction of fear, greed, and delusion. I've used the word in my own life, the nibbanification, if you will, of presence. Another way to look at mindfulness and mindful intelligence is to bring a liberating freedom. It's not a deficit consciousness. We're not overcoming anxiety and stress and all those pedantic things that are commodified that make a lot of people money. Beautify means reinvent the language. I am liberating my freedom. I'm not just practicing to get better. Okay, so liberating freedom, and whatever it is in the phenomenology of consciousness, if you see a deity, I've seen so many on the DMT, the MEO molecule, on the psilocybin, and also on the mindfulness molecule in intensive meditation settings. For days, you are communing. Those of you who know this isn't some phantasmagorical comment. Those of you who know, you're communing in shared space of beings that aren't visible to the naked eye based upon the frequency of a normal perception. The same thing with the ear. I spent a long time in Sri Lanka on a very small island, and because of the meditation, because of the good karma, because of the context, because of the ongoing silence, I was hearing things that were purely celestial. You know what I mean? You hear music that humans can't make. You're reading things that aren't being told to you. You're, for lack of better terms, because of the, you're downloading information that is already in the collective without having to read it. You are now living in a more dimensional Dhamma. That is so rad, so cool. You don't need the molecule to do that on MEO or DMT or with, you can do it if you need to, but the less you do it, the better. I mean, the less quantity and the less frequency. So we train the fibers of consciousness, the Dhamma fibers of consciousness, to rely on the strength of our mindfulness and our intelligence over a substance, a form, a location. You're with me? Okay. Deities, nefarious deities, UFOs. I say this with tremendous respect to my longtime colleague, Leslie Kane. She's all over the media today. Dedicated for years of her life as one of my best friends and ally, dear sister, family. We started the Burma Project USA together way back in '89. She's gone on to be one of the world's top investigative journalists. Her strength is her discernment and her tremendous capacity to present information freely without spin. She's brought forth the UFO phenomena with colleagues of hers. I don't know them by name. And I really recommend that you read her book, Leslie Kane, UFO, and she's interviewed some of the world's leading authorities in culture, politics, and in the military who've had intimate encounters with the phenomena of the UFO. It doesn't mean aliens, it doesn't mean beings or flying these things. It just means they're completely not understood by the depth of science and physics that we know. She's a fascinating woman. Her work is a fascinating contribution to the future of life. And the UFO is a phenomenon now that's broken the mainstream. It's not from Russia. It's not from China. That's just a warmongering kind of let's increase the defense budget story. It points to, and those of us who know that yoga and meditation and the molecules of the lysergic and all the various other forms, we learned that as teenagers, that we live in simultaneity. We live in multidimensionality. And all of a sudden, it's breaking now on a mainstream level. What does that tell us about the nature of life? That's what's most important to me. Okay. Dark forces. They're around. Very few people know that one of the most famous discourses of the Buddha, called the Metta Sutta, loving kindness, metta, was born out of a relationship of monks and I think nuns too, living in a forest, not too dissimilar from circa 2021 at the site of Haleakala, but ancient India, timelessness in nature. There they were meditating in this forest as renunciates. And they were all kind of respecting each other's autonomy, and yet there was disturbances. This is in the classical Buddhist texts and the commentaries in the Metta Sutta. And there were disturbances, physical disturbances, emotional disturbances, interior disturbances, bad odors, unsightly images, strange dreams. And so they kind of broke their silence and collaborated and realized that the group of them were experiencing something similar, and they were all surprised by this. So they sought out their Kalyanamitta, Gautama, the Buddha, and presented the information of their experience to him. And as it said in the sutta, the Buddha with his own, I love this, with his own psychic eye. By the way, just a pause here. If you look traditionally at the Buddha's texts for the first 20, 25 years, and actually even until he died, and which drew me to Mahasi Sayadaw, which drew me to Burma, which drew me to classical Buddhism, it wasn't this dry mindfulness story. It was the esoteric dimensionality that they included things that I had many experiences of when I was a young teenager, being close to Edgar Cayce in Virginia Beach, Virginia, with clairvoyance and telepathy and past life, and eventually at UVA with the whole rebirth story, and this deep dimensionality of coexisting in dimensions of life that don't normally get talked about. And so the Buddha was saying with his psychic eye, you, oh brothers, are absolutely accurate in your perception. Your disturbances are not mind-made. They are deities who are in this vicinity of where you're meditating, and I don't know exactly the reason why, but it was probably something to do with the encroachment of these humans in their scene. You know how we get prioritize our security and our privacy, and oh God, that helicopter, it's annoying me, that toxic auditory energy of tourists on this island, and the frequency of the cars and the costs, and you're infringing on my space. Okay, you got it. The deities in the forest felt they were being infringed upon. Very much like the native Hawaiians, if you know what I'm talking about. And then the indigenous up in Canada that found all those kids. And the 15 million Native Americans, infringing is a kind of human thing. And so we've got multidimensionality, and the human monks and nuns were infringing on the psychic ease and peace of the deities because their mind states weren't as relaxed and at peace as the inhabitants of this forest. So because of their lack of wisdom, according to the commentary, they created a kind of psychic energy of disconnection for them to drive them out. And they drove them right to the Buddha, and the Buddha said, it's because of your mind state. They don't like you. What we need to do here is to pacify their fear. Imagine having a Kalyanamitta who could do this. He said, here, practice this. The Metta Sutta. First and foremost, develop love for yourself. Soften your own psyche. Include, embrace your own inner beingness, your complexities. May I be happy. You know that one? May I be free of suffering. May I be free of stress and anxiety. Shower, bathe, wave oneself from the inside through with these incessant cognitive waves of self-directed metta. This is where the Metta Sutta came from. This is it. About deities. And then gradually expand that wave of inclusivity to include the deities in the forest. May you, reverend beings, as devas in this field that we are now coexisting in, it is with honor that we sit here out of support for the best of our lives and the best of you. We wish you all happiness and freedom from anxiety and stress. And they showered the deities with metta. This is where the Metta Sutta comes from. In Burma and other countries, in Thailand and Sri Lanka, in some places in India, they chant the Metta Sutta over and over again, not just to soothe the humans in the vicinity, but to soothe the deities, the devas, whom also, and the lower creatures that also have anxiety, stress, fear, greed, and privacy and privilege issues, very much like us humans. And so as a result of this, through the metta, the deities quieted down. And of course, as this story ends in a most positive way, the monks and the nuns in the forest, they said, became enlightened. Thus, the Metta Sutta is in our lives today as a result of a deep honor and respect and inclusivity, mutuality with deities, nefarious and luminous. Equal to that, I want to share something with you. This is very personal. People have been asking me a lot about, do I fear death? And my response to that is, fuck yeah. And do I live in that adamant sense of difficulty or impending complexity? No. The way that I have learned to work with that over the decades, and more specifically in the last 4 months, well, actually I should say the last year and a half, specifically in Los Angeles in my temple, and here in this temple, is what's known as the practice of rebirthing and bhavana and parami all intertwined. I am not dying, I am rebirthing. End of story. I am navigating my human existence as I've been trained, more specifically trained's not the right word, Alan, that I have been supported in understanding on how to navigate where I am to where I want to be. And I am very clear as I came here and based upon the good work of Summer Richardson to find a temple where I can be safe and protected from noise and dissonance. I am here temporarily in this beautiful place caretaken by the owners of this property. And I do believe that I am rebirthing deliberately to a destination. Oh, where might that be? I have my cognitive psychic eyes on a location. Just like you may want to be in love, may you want to be free, may you want to find the goddess of your dreams, I want to find the divine feminine in the next Buddha. Avalokiteshvara, Maitreya, the divine embodiment of the feminine within the last Buddha in this cycle of 24. You may not know that. This is esoteric Buddhism, just like the Metta Sutta is. And it said, there's a Maitreya somewhere in this room, but it said that in the simultaneity of this dimension of humans, there's Tusita, a dimension of radiance and cognitive brightness, where the Buddha to be, Maitreya, is said to be in his final, her final bisexual birth, before taking a final incarnation in an earth dimension. This is very important, that although the Manusa Loka, hear that, points to the human dimension, it doesn't mean earth-based existence. UFOs are Manusa, dimensionality of consciousness of physical form that's visible by the eye and can be heard by the ear and known through the mind. It's said that Maitreya will take a next birth in the Manusa Loka, where he and the selected inhabitants of what's called a samsaric sangha will take birth to then have the last great sasana, the expression of Dhamma radiance in the samsara, before dying off for timeless years into the future. My trajectory, my desire, my rebirthing, my bhavanification, my nibbanification is deliberately every day in the morning for 5 hours of practice, I'll be very personal about it, of navigating here to rebirth there. It's very specific practices that I learned more recently in the years before my teacher, Seda U Pandita, passed away. It's called aditant, the embracing of conviction in the truthfulness of something and drawn upon the timeless forces of your own transformational wisdom. If we're rebirthing into the future, it means that we rebirthed from a long time in the past. That means we're the accumulation, right? Go there with me. We're already in our Van Gogh or Rembrandt. We're already in our Dylan. We're already in our hip hop. We already are rad artists of the existential awakening. We've got infinite parami development from the past. Look at the lives that we live. Look at the information that we know. Look at the skills that we have. We're very rare creatures. Infinite rebirthing. And I want only 2 more lifetimes. I want no more than 2. Even 2 is pressing the edge. I don't want to be born in a prison camp and raped. I don't want to see that upon anyone. I want to understand the most secret esoteric things found within this existence. And I want to be in the company of a Buddha. Why? I don't want to be a Buddha. I want to hear a Buddha, watch a Buddha. I'm an apprentice. I want to see that woman, that man, manifest the radiance of these teachings in real time. I have that desire to be in that kind of cognitive cinema. And the second part is, I don't know about you, but at this stage of life, yes, it's nice to embrace and to touch, but I've been consciously celibate now for 3 years, not even masturbating. It's a sacred conviction in what I want to maintain in myself right now. And yes, would I like to be in love? I am in love. Do I want to be in the company of a goddess? I'm in the company of goddesses. Do I really want the ultimate? Yes. I call it my samsaric sangha. Maybe you have it too. You know how when you meet people, there's instant flow? Instant intimacy? Sacred flow? Isn't that rare? Isn't that special? Isn't that amazing when 2 people connect and you go like, holy fuck. It's trans-romantic. It's trans-erotic. It's the sapiosexual, right? You're making love in ways that all you can say is, we've known each other, right? I know that sounds Maui-like, okay, but it's not. We are destined to meet sisters and brothers, lovers and goddesses, and problematic humans. And problematic humans, you know who you are. Cut your bullshit. Grow up, okay? Stay out. I love you, but I don't want to agree with that level of delusion, you know, that boundary story. Know who not to participate in. They're not members of your samsaric sangha. You can learn from everything I know, okay? People in Burma being tortured and raped are learning from them. Oh, I don't want that. Samsaric sangha are those people, those key lovers, brothers and sisters that want to dance with you in the most truthful, intimate level of cognitive, conscious, mindful awakening, and you know that they have your best interest in their heart. Do you know those people? Yes. Call it family, call it tribe. We want to associate, and our lives are about making good on that promise of that mutuality. We embody them so much that we trust them so sufficiently that I'm growing with you. You reflect back to me what I don't see in myself, and you reflect back to me what I want to be in myself. Ubuntu. Samsaric Sangha. I want to meet the special boys and girls and devas in my infinite past. I know a few of them in this life. And I'm open to meeting more, but I want to meet those sacred savants that when we look at each other, we go, like, you know something? For 500 lifetimes in a row, we were married. That's why we're so down with each other. Look at the Buddha's teaching. Here, I'm going to say this out. The Buddha was married. The Buddha is a Buddha based upon a woman. The woman. Not the divine feminine in him that's been repressed as a man. He became a Buddha because of women. Not only born through the womb and all that. His wife, Yasodhara. Look at the sutta, the Yasodhara Sutta. Not often talked about. Here she is at the end of her life, having been a nun with a big following, and she goes to the Buddha. She says, you know, it's time for me to depart. I want to enter the parinibbana, the fruition of my enlightenment. Before I go, I'd like to share with you my beloved, who we've been through infinite time to be who we are together in this final moment, in this last life, the Yasodhara Sutta. He listens with ultimate reverence to his wife, who happened to have been his wife from time immemorial in incarnations where she dedicated herself as much as humanly possible to non-projection and to support the best in her and the best in him. In essence, the way I read it, you, Buddha, are a Buddha because of me. Us. In an inseparable, intimate mutuality. Call it yin and yang and masculine and feminine. But where is Yasodhara in this room? Where is she in our hearts? So my point here is that, yeah, wow, okay, cool. Who's Maitreya's wife? Who's your wife? Who's your husband? Who's your lover? Is the lover you're with really your lover? Or is it something sort of a place marker in the cognitive deck of cards? It feels good that you're working out things, but you know it's time to swim on, to walk on, to stand naked on your own 2 feet and call in something more remarkably refined. You know it exists, whether it be in this form or in the next life. I'm calling in both this life and in the next life. It's called samsaric sangha, the practice of parami, the navigation of the human life to the next life. And pray that I can achieve the radiance of that commitment, and in my next life after Maitreya, be reborn in that sangha where I want personally the full dimension of whatever is possible within consciousness. I don't want to just talk about rebirth, talk about psychic powers. The Dalai Lama is the 14th incarnation. Tibetan Buddhists talk about psychic powers. Heal cancer. Heal war. I ask you, I invite you, come forward, nuns and monks all over the world. Don't talk about it as something esoteric that's secretive in some kind of cave of your own fear. Heal the world of genocide. Heal the world of totalitarianism. I know the biggest miracle in the world is mindfulness. But hey, there's no time right now. Stop the locomotive of the extinction. If you've got psychic powers, deliver. Yeah. So, by way of sharing with you this conversation today in the afternoon, just the foundation of our next 2 days, reincarnation, deities, the psychedelic, meditation, Dhamma, addiction. I don't want to go and descend into the word addiction. I want to ascend into the meaning of a trans-addictive labeling. Let me stop right there. If you are feeling that you're addicted to something, I'm not in the realm of teaching or healing, but I can tell you the way that I've worked with the collectively agreed upon denigrating label addiction. I'm out of control, so much so that what I do creates more hell for me and my family and my friends than it's worth. But hell, I like it and I'm going to do it again. Till the point you're on the street, the needle's dangling from your own groin, you're penniless, and you're still wanting to do that line of whatever it is. Okay, addiction can take you out. Point one, 35 years ago I had a board member of AA at one of my retreats. And I asked him in front of about 80 people, sir, what would you say the essence that you would give someone who's an addict? What would you say to them? He laughed. He said, I tell them all the same thing. Do it until you die. Go for it. Only then can you stop. Go for it. Going for it, for me, means not only just wild, blind, abandoned. When I stopped cigarette smoking in Paris 28 years ago, I had what was called a smoking chair. I interrupted the repetitive, joyful habit of reaching for lucky all the time, whenever I wanted. I could write anything because I had lucky in my mouth. I could go anywhere in the world because I was never lonely. I had lucky. I had nicotine. I had Marlboro Lights and Lucky. I loved the cigarette. Until I finally decided to stop, and all of a sudden I was abandoned, I was naked. But I couldn't do that so quickly. And eventually I realized I had to bring my monastery into the nicotine. What does that mean? I created what was called a smoking chair. Rather than reaching blindly anytime I wanted to eat, masturbate, have sex, lie, cheat, make money, meditate, I had one place on earth that I could smoke a cigarette. It's called the smoking chair. You want to do a line of cocaine? You want to do fentanyl? You want to masturbate? You want a sex addiction? You want porn? Take it and beautify it. 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 Take the shame out of it. Take the cultural baggage out of it. Take the darkness out of it. Beautify it. Bring light to it. Celebrate it. Anoint it with the most powerful transformational light of your soul. My smoking chair. I practiced eating meditation, sitting meditation, walking meditation, monastic meditation in that smoking chair. What did that mean? Point 3 with addiction, I cannot advocate it enough. It's just an oral fixation with a consciousness element of dopamine satisfaction that, if not done in moderation, leads to denigration. So you got to interrupt the flow of behavior with sensation, physical and mental. You got to insert intimacy, sacred presence, like massage therapy, a psychotherapist there, a plant medicine guru, a Kalyanamita, you, your own guide, your own lover. You've got to sit inside of your own heart and behavior and call off the speed. In a monastery, we were told to take off our watches, take the clock off of your psyche, take time out of the equation. There's no point A to point B here. It's the process. That's right. You know where I'm going with that? To like the coolest girl on the planet with lighting your cigarette. You feel every sensation of lifting that to your lips. I'm going to get enlightened smoking this cigarette. Don't overcome an addiction. Alan, I know you're never going to be down with the recovery movement. Either you're in or you're out. You're just talking to yourself through elegant spiritual denialism, and you're just aiding and abetting an addictive mind. Guess what? I've overcome every addiction in my life this way. And it's all I can share with you. Beautify it. Slow it down. Sanctify it. You might die smoking. You want to go down in shame that you're a cigarette smoker, that you're a coke addict? Whatever you do, even when you meditate, slow it down. Take the dogma out of it. Take the compulsion out of it. In breath, neither wish to live, out breath, nor fear dying. It's not just some repetitive mantra. We're compelled today to walk our Dhamma talk. Never going to be graded by the lie of perfection unless you enforce it through a denial of process. There's no recovery except through the absolute absence of fear, greed, and delusion. There's always going to be the concept of relapse. I've gone through so many periods where I was pure and holy, even enlightened in 6 different traditions, and all of a sudden seeing myself fall into the darkness of my own denial. And I would put that cigarette down in the ashtray. You ever hold an inhalation of smoke rather than just get it out to take another one? You want to talk about a miserable practice. Do pranayama with nicotine. Anoint your lungs with a deep inhalation like you do. Now you really want to do ayahuasca, you really want to do psychedelics. do a high dose of acid and smoke in your smoking chair. And bring the most radical meditative sensitivity to that process. You'll be well on your way to saying goodbye to that which kills you. The same could be said for the hypocrite I am with my consumption of the ultimate nicotine, which is fossil fuel, electricity. I'm an absolute hypocrite. We have to embody the fact that none of us will be free from the hypocrisy of being born into conditions that kill us. Process is everything. There is no safety from addiction unless we're enlightened. And that's somewhere in the future, I pray. So addiction. There are so many people who are clean and sober who fetishize money. There's something so culturally acceptable and honored in our societies by wealth. You could almost do anything when you're wealthy and be in some way oddly respected and celebrated. This land here on Maui, when I came here in 71, it was like stolen from the local populations and being sold at some phenomenally inexpensive level. I was looking online just at some of these properties here in Kula. You know, you can barely enter the real estate market for less than $4 or $5 million. And they go up to 10, 20. There's some here for 30. I mean, Oprah just lives up the street here. What did she pay for that? I mean, it's like, hello, top heavy. It's so much money and loot here. It's going to sink the island with greed and delusion. And wait until electricity and planes are interrupted and all of a sudden these wealthy homes, well, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? And so I'm saying addiction, and I'm saying all the various things that are challenging the addictions to substances and pharmaceuticals. But the deeper addictions in our society are to capitalism, to corruption, to inauthenticity. Look at the ways in which we fold and bend and contort in order to live in the predicted addictive mold of how society we interpret tells us that we shouldn't be. I mean, just think of the ways in which we puppet and contort ourselves on the stage of conformity. And we don't smoke, we don't do drugs, we don't do pharmaceutical drugs, but we vote for assholes in power who empower forever wars and make a lot of money on stock options and arms merchants in Silicon Valley. I mean, hello. So when we talk about addictions, not to narrow down into the substance users. Often substance users, and I know this has been deeply studied sociologically and psychologically and spiritually, we are creatures of context, right? And so much of my life is conditioned by my context. And I read this book some years back. I think it's called 50 Years of Psychotherapy and the World is Getting Worse. And the author will come to me in a minute. I met him several times. I read the book. It was really transformational at the time. But in essence, he was a very renowned Jungian psychologist who had a very thriving private practice. And he noticed over time in his dialogues with the co-author of the book in a series of letters back and forth, he noticed that when they left their home city where he would see them in person, it wasn't unexpected to get mail from them about how happy they were having moved. And a lot of the issues that they dealt with him over years in private practice somehow receded and were gone. He began to see this more and more and began to realize that very much of the psychotherapeutic, psychological, psyche constellation is very connected to context. And shift context, and a lot of the issues that we deal with in conditioning and in psyche and in the deeper conditions of the unknown within the mind often disappear or attenuated or weakened. He began to see that Jungian therapy was totally individual. No two of us will do it alike. And I studied with my neighbor as a student of him. He was a famous, also Jungian therapist, up in Marin County, where he would tell me that there's no way to commodify or to do as Jung did ultimately, to state that the human psyche can be transformed the same in two people. It had to be individual, had to be utterly unique, and it had to be terribly intimate and transparent to the point where even in today's social, political, insurance norms, that a lot of really effective psychotherapy can't even be practiced because of lawsuits. And I really feel that a lot of what we deal with in terms of how we marginalize addicts, we really neglect that it's a social, educational, contextual issue that we're very much complicit in propagating as we try to heal these people from their addictions and our own. I know, for example, when I was in LA back in the 70s, where I lived as a young, brash, meditating artist, that I was terribly conflicted with the amount of morphine, of cocaine, of my obsession with art, with sexuality, with alcohol, with nicotine. It was just what young, brash, maverick artists did then. You, me. And for the life of me, I thought I was going to die if I continued living in Venice Beach at that time. I could not, would not intervene in my compulsions to desecrate my mind and body to the point where I was becoming quite ill and infected biologically and mentally by the excessive use of alcohol and cocaine and nicotine. And so it was a real terrible time for me. Cutting to the chase, I had been to Burma, was not allowed to stay there because of the dictatorship. And rather than thinking I could ever get back into this safe haven, invited Mahasi Sayadaw to come to Los Angeles and organize a retreat for him. And then eventually one in the East Coast. And the day before he left, I asked him if I can ordain with him and to go back to Burma and try if I could be given a longer-term visa. And he said, well, if you ordain, we'll give it our best, but it's highly doubtful. We live under dictatorship. And I flew the next day back to Burma. The point being is, when I got to Burma, the shift of context radically interrupted my addictive tendencies in LA. I shaved my head, I donned the mahogany robes, I ceased the use of alcohol, and I stopped volitionally sexuality and masturbation, and committed to only a few hours of sleep a night, along with only 2 meals in the day, no food after 12 noon. It was my rehab center, which is not uncommon and not often talked about by a lot of Westerners who have gone to Asian monasteries pre-AA. Monasteries became recovery centers, and it was for me. I didn't stop my addictions, though, to be very transparent about this, is that although I stopped cocaine, I stopped alcohol, I started the use of opium. And Burma is notorious, because of the Golden Triangle, to have high-quality opiates and opium. And the Burmese tradition, they lace their cheroots or their cigars not so much with nicotine, but with opium. And I knew this from having been in there, so I snuck out of the monastery and found those who would be willing to buy me, because I couldn't handle money, these cigars laced with opium, and I would smoke them in the monastery. And it was my transitional substance to be doing it. You don't have to only do one inhalation if you got opium. And the thing goes down barely. You put it down, and the next thing you know, it's like, holy fuck, I like being a monk. I think I'm going to have another day of meditation. I'm going to come back to the inhalation of the opium and lowering my arm and just put my hands on my chest and meditate through the night, wake up robust. And I found myself delighting in my lifestyle, knowing that I replaced cocaine, alcohol, cigarettes with opium. And I did it mindfully, though, to the point where, cutting right to the chase, in a short period of time, it must have been 5 years. No, I'm just joking. 3 months, I stopped the use of opiated tobacco. And stopped drinking, obviously, stopped any overt forms of sexuality, although nuns and monks know that in monasteries it's not overt. Many of you have practiced Tantra and Neo-Tantra, sapiosexual shared dynamics in monasteries. The cognitive frequency of intimacy, you really learn the fine art. No, that's an exaggeration. You learn how to begin to play in the realm of intimacy through consciousness. Because it's all shared space. People think you can become a nun or a monk to practice on your own. It's not at all. It's all about the sanctity of shared space. People ask about meditation. There's insights that are groovy. But what I remember are my relationships. And so I will like to close for today and do a little bit of a sitting meditation for the final period of this period. And I want to conclude with our beginning for tomorrow, which is how I want to share to those of you who are interested, who want to come around tomorrow at 10 here Maui time on July 3rd. I want to share how I live my Dhamma life. I don't want to teach anything. I just want to simply share what I do, how I engage Dhamma as a vocation of my integrity. And the last thing before we get into the meditation, which is sort of the first thing for tomorrow, is increasing my regard for liberation through relatedness. I'm not pointing here just simply to the beauty of wise psychological rapport, that too. But, I feel often very alone and sometimes quite lonely. I was very familiar with Los Angeles. I'm very unfamiliar right now and meeting new people, and I tend to be a bit of a pleaser and accommodator, but I'm really trying to put boundaries. And it's really what I'm pointing to here is that as I sequester from the world, and I want to go into a retreat for the next several months to try to do what I can to dilate this aneurysm, but it's about higher fidelity communion. I'm really kind of on about this. I really only want to be with the few boys and girls who want to play in that rarefied sacred field. I want to increase the poetic of shared space and to see what I can learn and discover trans-psychedelic. Yes, I might employ some of those things too, but there's something so pure and beautiful about the interrelatedness of my life. When I think about my friends and my lovers and my friends and my Sangha here, I can't be who I am without you. I was filling out my 5 wishes just yesterday, and I couldn't do it. The 5 wishes, if I'm incapacitated through illness, who am I anointing as to be my voice of conscience in the absence of me making choices myself? Do I wish to be on life support? If I'm on life support, am I asking this person to make sure that I'm taking off life support? If I'm in a coma and I'm on life support, to take it out? If I'm in coma, allow me to pass without any tubes or oxygen. And I'm crying and celebrating, and I'm going like, wow, what an intimate rapport this is with myself. And who do you want to be near you? Do you want your hand held? Do you want music played? Do you want water on your lips? Where do you want your remains to be placed? What do you want to happen? It was like, okay, go there. I bring it up now because my life has been like your life. I hope you know that. And please remind me if I forget that it's a set of relationships. And how we treat those relationships, I can't even emphasize, is everything. I've joked, it just takes being diagnosed with a fatal illness to realize who doesn't like you. You know very quickly who's not responding. Not that you're telling the world, I'm dying, please come back into my life. It ain't happening that way. There are those who dig deep trenches. I'm not saying overcome them. I'm not looking for forgiveness from anyone. I'm not looking to forgive anyone. But forgive yourself, anoint yourself, give to the very best that you can give to those few people, less than a handful, right? I'm a very public person digitally, but a very private person on a human level. Those relationships mean everything, more now than ever. Tomorrow I want to share how I've anointed that as my Dhamma practice, how to make relationship the vehicle for transformational awakening. So from my heart to yours, thank you for tuning in today. If you're keen to want to meditate with us for this final few minutes of this group session, please may I encourage you to hang. I'm going to personally take a 2 or 3 minute pause in this video. I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to leave it running. And may I encourage you to find a comfortable place in your home, wherever you may be. Get a cushion out or a chair or a bench. And we're going to play a little bit into a simple, short, guided meditation. So take a few minutes and find that place wherever you may be. And I'll come back in a minute or 2 or 3 and talk and share how I meditate and how you might consider meditating should you be inspired to practice with us. So from my heart to yours, thank you. Okay, so just speaking extemporaneously here, may I encourage you, should you wish, to find a place to sit. Of course, if you prefer to stand, that's your choice. Wherever you may be in the world. And the way I sit is to take a posture that feels most not comfortable to me alone, but the most dignified. I don't think of longevity, I just think of a few minutes. What posture do I feel that I could live and die in these next few minutes that speak to me in the most profound way as the embodiment of wisdom, of dignity, of conscience, of truth? Sanctify, embody, infuse interiority with the importance of self-respect, number one. Take a posture that reflects poise. I personally like to sit upright. I place my hands on my knees, palm down. Others place their left hand with their palm up and place their right hand and rest the back of their hand in their left hand. And loosely touch thumbs or palms down on your knees. For the first few seconds, each of my sittings, I make whatever final adjustments I need to make in my body posture. You can never ultimately, as you know, remove stress, tension. Again, dignity, poise, upright, keeping the back somewhat straight without being too tense. Let the shoulders relax without losing height in our sitting posture. Without a doubt, take a breath or two, and any level of inhalation and exhalation as if you were sitting alone. Breathe in, breathe out. The overall theme here in the first few minutes, make peace with your spot. I'm upholding my commitment to truth in the sacred and the embodiment of my most authentic wisdom. I want to know and be self-honest with myself simply as I am, embodied in this moment. The final tweaks in our posture: head upright, neck relaxed, lower the chin just a little bit, keep the mouth closed, lower the tongue, allow it to simply relax in the mouth. If your eyes are still moving or open, gently close them without squeezing them shut. If they open, it's quite natural. Just develop the tendency to gradually close them. And for the next few minutes, just make a conscious, elegant little determination to stop all volitional movements. Of course, unless needed, either through knee pain or ankle pain or extreme restlessness, but otherwise, chill. A poised, reverential presence. Point 1, establish a physical posture that reflects dignity and make the succession of tiny adjustments: eye, hands, neck, mouth, shoulders. I try to remember, sit down on the floor, the bench, the chair, not to lean forward. We're taking the future as much as possible out of the psyche, out of consciousness. We could call this the practice of now-time presence. We'll get into the presence part now. If you're asking, what do I do with my breath? Allow it to sink into the abdomen. Meditation, for me, isn't about breath control. Let the breathing breathe in any way breathing wants to breathe. Now, the next step for me, which I often do, either with my right hand or my left hand, I personally place it on my heart. just for a few minutes. It both grounds me and equally sanctifies symbolically, and equally on a deeper level, the purity of embodying existence on the terms of being mortal any second. And it happens tens of thousands of times a day around the world. People die. We're choosing to feel life come through us, through the uniqueness of our conditioning, through our consciousness, through our senses. And I lower my hand back to my knee. Let the breathing breathe on its own. Now what? What I do, I infuse the entirety of my inner being, the entirety of my body, with a transparent awareness that sees and knows what's arising, but does not keep anything. Filling the body as oxygen would the lungs and the body. Fill the body, fill the mind with the transparency of this intelligent, non-judgmental, non-grasping awareness. What do I feel? I personally see an image of myself, and I see images of you in this room and nature. Mental seeing images. But what do I feel as the nature of my body as the primary experience? We talk about embodied wisdom, embodied presence, embodied mindfulness. Here is the act of that. Infuse your body with the awareness of the sensations inherent in form. What do I feel? I feel the pressure of my legs and buttocks on the chair. I feel pressure against the back of the chair. I feel tension, vibration, sturdiness, rippling forms of energy. Let the breathing breathe on its own. Infuse the entirety of the body from the inside to the inner epidermis with this mindful, intelligent, transparent presence. It has one function: to feel. If the mind wanders at all from the simple act of embodied mindful presence, of physical sensations anywhere in the body, gently bring this awareness through choice back inside the body. Relax the breath, sit upright, and continue the meditative action of mindfully feeling, changing sensations anywhere they may be felt. Try to develop an inclusive awareness that simultaneously inhabits the whole of the body. If I may, the reason I choose the whole of the body as basic foundation, we'll get into the next dimension in a second, is it minimizes translation between sitting and moving, bending. I'm training my mindfulness to inhabit the body as basis of being, embodied presence. If you train oneself in it, it becomes more natural, where the awareness situates within the body post-sitting, pre-sitting. Now let's do this for the next 5 minutes in silence. One task: inhabit the physical sensations unique to us within the body. Situate, occupy, be aware of these sensations, sometimes stronger or more overt in one area of the body than another. Other times, the fullness of the body, even to the point of the subtlety of the breathing and the sensations of the breathing in the chest and the abdomen, in the face and the hands. The gentle personal aesthetic of coming back within and inhabiting the fullness of the form from inside. What do you feel? Just feel it. Let the breathing breathe on its own, sitting upright, relaxed and poised simultaneously. And for the final few minutes of the sitting, as a taste, keeping our eyes closed, sitting upright. If you need to adjust your posture for whatever reason, that's your choice, otherwise to sit still. What I like to do is to feel into what I call the multiplicities of intersecting intelligences that animate life at this very moment. Very personal type of meditation. There's an intelligence that's uniquely within consciousness, dreams, conditions, memories, language, seemingly very unique to us. There's a neural mapping at a precognitive level, and equally a biological intelligence that intersects. Does consciousness exceed the brain and the heart? Does it precede the brain and the heart? Cognitive intelligences, biological intelligences at this very moment, beyond our own capacity for yes or no. The heart beats, the lungs breathe, thoughts exist, sensations in the body, how much blood pumps and moves through the veins, the oxygen, the muscles. And we sit deeply embedded in a physical ecosystem that enwraps us all, inseparable from nature, oxygen, light, water. It's so often in neglect, if not contempt and denial of context. May I invite you to invite me, to invite everyone who may be listening and feeling, mindfully feel the intersecting ecosystem of consciousness with biology, with nature. On this planet, the laws of physics that we sit within. Occupy the multiplicity of intelligences animating, governing who we are together in this world at this time, on this planet, in this solar system, in this galaxy, at this dimension, in this samsara. Honor, appreciate, feel the deep, deep intelligences, and equally in the final minute, the Dhamma intelligence, the invisible radical discernment of conscience and dignity, and the choice-making capacity of consciousness to engage the phenomena of inner and outer being, to free this deep invisibility of that which denigrates self and other, fear, violence, delusion, greed. Going beyond normal identity, normal concerns. Occupy inherent intelligence and take refuge as we close today in Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, not as Buddhists, the qualities of awakening, the laws that govern that awakening, and the inseparable nature of mutuality as a way to discover this Dhamma and freedom. Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha. The vocation of the yogi. Buddhang saranang gacchami, Dhammang saranang gacchami, Sanghang saranang gacchami, Dutiyampi Buddhang saranang gacchami, Dutiyampi Dhammang saranang gacchami, Dutiyampi Sanghang saranang gacchami. If you feel inclined to chant this final time, allow me to chant the phrase, I take refuge in the qualities of awakening Buddha. I take refuge in the qualities of awakening to this Dhamma. I take refuge in Sangha, deep regard and respect for mutuality and relationship as vehicle to embody the qualities of awakening in Dhamma. So I'll say it once, and if you wish to say it a second time together, please, your choice. Buddhang saranang gacchami, Buddhang saranang gacchami, Dhammang saranang gacchami, saranang gacchami, Sanghang saranang gacchami. And may our collective development of these three qualities develop our paramis, our states of excellence, and the beautification of consciousness. May they guide us, may they support us, may they bring us safety, peace, and happiness. And may all beings flourish from this day's deep dive into our heart of love, compassion, and embodied wisdom. From my heart to yours, thank you for being in my life. Thank you for being a part of today. And may all beings who are connected to us participate if they so wish tomorrow. Thank you. So as we end today, thank you for coming out. Thank you, Karen. For those of you who are out there who want to participate tomorrow, wherever you may be in the world, please may I invite you to invite your friends. It's a rare virtual global gathering to explore, to dance, to love, and to create something that's rare to do in this world. So from my heart to yours, let's keep taking it higher. And I hope to see you tomorrow at this time, tomorrow the 3rd at 10 a.m. here in Hawaii. Okay, have a beautiful evening wherever you may be, or morning, and thank you from my heart.